There's a quiet war going on inside a lot of us, a kind of mental and emotional exhaustion we've started to treat as normal. You wake up tired, your thoughts feel heavy, and joy seems like something you have to earn. We point fingers at our jobs, our phones, the constant noise of modern life. But deep down, we know the real issue runs deeper. It's a disconnection from our inner rhythm, from the practices that ground us and give life meaning. The Stoics spoke often of this imbalance, not in medical terms, but in the language of the soul. They saw it as a failure to live with intention, to align our days with what truly matters. But the solution isn't some grand reinvention. It's a quiet return to simple, powerful choices, ones rooted in self-discipline, clarity, and presence. And if this message resonates with you, if it reminds you of something you've been needing to hear, there's one small free way to support the journey. Tap that subscribe button. Now let's dive into 10 timeless ways to come back to yourself. 1. Move, even a little bit. Some days it feels like your body is made of cement. You wake up heavy, your limbs sluggish, your mind already 10 steps behind the day. The thought of doing anything, even something simple like getting off the couch, feels overwhelming. And the irony is, in those exact moments when motion feels impossible, it's actually your lifeline. Let's get something straight. This isn't about chasing six-pack abs or pushing through pain in a high-intensity workout. This is about movement in its most basic, most powerful form. A slow walk, a gentle stretch, rocking back and forth to music in your kitchen. It's about meeting your body where it is, not where you think it should be. Because here's what most people don't realize. Movement isn't just physical, it's deeply neurological. When you move your body, even a little, you start to shift your chemistry. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation, begins to stir. Your mind starts to clear. The fog lifts just enough to see the next small step. And often, that's all it takes to start a comeback. Aristotle said, "What we learn to do, we learn by doing." And that applies to momentum too. The feeling of being stuck isn't always a lack of ideas. It's a lack of motion. Your body wants to stay where it is. It seeks what's familiar, even if it's uncomfortable. That's biology. But the moment you choose to move, you send a different message. You're saying, "We're not staying here. We're not surrendering to this." The Stoics understood this on a deep level. Cleanthes, one of the early Stoics, worked as a laborer by night and studied by day. He believed physical work sharpened the mind. To him, movement wasn't separate from clarity. It was the gateway to it. That ancient wisdom lines up perfectly with modern neuroscience. You don't think your way out of a rut, you move your way out. And don't get it twisted. You don't need a 45-minute plan or a step counter. You just need intention. Walk barefoot across your floor and feel the ground beneath you. Roll your shoulders back while waiting for your coffee. These tiny actions might not look like much, but they're powerful signals to your brain. We're alive, we're moving, we're capable. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist persists." When you resist movement, when you stay locked in stillness, hoping for the mood to change first, you stay stuck. You prolong the heaviness. But when you move, even in the smallest way, you break that resistance. You interrupt the cycle of stagnation and create space for something new to enter. And here's another truth. You don't have to feel ready. That feeling rarely comes first. What comes first is the decision to move anyway, to do something small, humble, quiet. And through that decision, your internal state begins to shift. Socrates believed the key to a strong mind was to care for the body. He wasn't talking about aesthetics. He was talking about energy, vitality. The body is a partner in your mental clarity, not just something to carry your head around. When your body is engaged, your thoughts become clearer, more grounded, more strategic. So here's what you do. You give yourself permission to move without pressure. No need for performance, no expectations of perfection. Just movement, simple, honest, healing movement. And when you move, you start to remember that you're not powerless, that you're not stuck for life. You're just paused, and every pause can become progress with one small shift. If you're feeling stuck, don't try to solve it all in your head. Get into your body. Let motion create the mental space you've been chasing. Let your steps become a philosophy of action. Because in the end, movement is more than exercise. It's self-respect in motion. It's the most ancient form of clarity. And it might just be the first step that brings you back to yourself. 2. Eat like you respect yourself. You ever notice how food becomes the first thing we reach for, not when we're hungry, but when we're tired, overwhelmed, anxious, or just emotionally scattered? You're not alone. It's automatic. Stress hits. Open the fridge. Bored. Scroll with one hand, snack with the other. Feeling low? Comfort food time. And for a few minutes, it works. You feel something, a spark, a small emotional cushion. But here's the thing we rarely talk about. That bite? It doesn't just go to your stomach, it goes straight to your brain. Yeah, your brain eats too. It's fed by what you put on your plate every single day. And when we talk about dopamine, that chemical spark behind motivation, focus, and mood, we're not just talking about mindset, we're talking about meals. Dopamine is built, quite literally, from the ingredients you consume. Protein-rich foods, healthy fats, nutrients like tyrosine, which is found in things like eggs, chicken, fish, nuts, beans. These are the raw materials your brain uses to build dopamine, the fuel that keeps you steady, clear, and emotionally balanced. Without them, you're asking your brain to function with no parts, no gas, no engine. Now contrast that with ultra-processed snacks, sugar spikes, late-night junk runs. They give you a rush, yes, a hit. But like any hit, it fades fast. What comes next? Crash, irritability, brain fog, emotional hunger that's louder than it was before. That's not just food messing with your waistline. That's food messing with your clarity. Seneca once said, "Drunkenness is nothing but voluntary madness." Now, he wasn't just talking about alcohol. He was talking about anything we use to escape, especially when we know it dulls us. Food, when abused, becomes a kind of quiet madness too. A way to numb instead of nourish. A way to avoid instead of align. And when that becomes the pattern, we start building a mind that runs on impulse rather than intention. Carl Jung had a line that cuts deep here. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Eating without awareness is one of those things. It's not about hunger. It's about distraction. We eat to avoid sitting with discomfort. But real nourishment, real healing, it happens when you stop running and start choosing. So, here's a better question then. What should I eat? Ask yourself, what kind of mind am I trying to build? Because every plate is a blueprint, every bite is a message. Is it saying, let's feel steady, let's think clearly, let's rise? Or is it saying, let's numb, escape, spiral? Plato believed the body and soul were deeply connected, that caring for one meant caring for both. When your food gives you energy, your mind follows. When your meals stabilize your blood sugar, they stabilize your emotions. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to track every gram, but you do need to notice. How do you feel after you eat? 2 hours later, what's your energy like? Your focus, your patience? When you start the day with intention, hydration, protein, something green, you send a signal to your nervous system. I choose stability over stimulation, and your brain hears that. It rewards you with clarity, with emotional bandwidth, with fewer spikes and crashes. That's not a diet, that's self-mastery. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I'd say the same about what's on your plate. When we eat on autopilot, we live on autopilot, and then we wonder why we're exhausted, unfocused, moody, and unmotivated. It's not a character flaw, it's chemistry, and chemistry can be changed. So next time you're standing in front of the fridge, pause, not with guilt, not with rules, with awareness. What do I really need right now? Fuel, rest, maybe just a moment of stillness. Because food is not just comfort, it's not just culture, it's communication. And the better you eat, the clearer that communication becomes. You're not feeding your cravings, you're feeding your future. 3. Sleep like your life depends on it, because it does. There's this idea floating around that if you just push harder, grind longer, and show up no matter what, you'll eventually break through. Hustle culture sells it like a badge of honor, like fatigue is some kind of trophy. But let's be real, no amount of caffeine or willpower can save you from the truth your body already knows. When you're running on fumes, everything becomes harder. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You can't outwork exhaustion. You can't outthink burnout. And you definitely can't out-hustle a nervous system that's begging for rest. Think back to the last time you barely slept. Everything felt louder, right? Your patience vanished. Small problems became mountains. Motivation, gone. That's not just being tired. That's your brain operating on a drained battery. More specifically, it's your dopamine system sputtering. Because here's the science no one taught us in school. Deep sleep is when dopamine gets rebuilt. It's the repair shop, the reset button, the place where clarity, energy, and resilience are restored. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." But here's the thing. How can you rise with purpose if you never truly rested the night before? You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't serve the world or yourself if you're showing up half alive, running on stress hormones and broken sleep cycles. Carl Jung said it perfectly. What did you do as a child that made the hours pass like minutes? Therein lies the key to your earthly pursuits. But when your brain is overloaded and unrested, you stop asking those kinds of questions. You lose touch with that deeper self. Your inner world gets foggy, and you start chasing stimulation just to feel something, scrolling late at night, watching one more episode, answering one more email. But that's not productivity, it's avoidance. It's restlessness disguised as responsibility. Plato believed that rest wasn't laziness, it was alignment, a chance to recalibrate the soul. He warned that when we neglect the body's needs, the mind suffers. And he was right. Because poor sleep doesn't just make you tired, it makes you reactive. You're quicker to snap, slower to think. You crave sugar, distraction, and dopamine from all the wrong places. And over time, this becomes your new normal, until you forget what real clarity even feels like. So what's the solution? It's not complicated. It's just inconvenient in a world that celebrates busyness. Start by treating your nights like sacred ground. Create a boundary around your evenings, not out of discipline, but out of respect. Dim the lights, shut off the noise. Let your room become a signal to your nervous system. We're done for the day. Socrates taught that wisdom begins in wonder, but wonder doesn't visit a tired mind. Wonder needs space, stillness, recovery. So if you're chasing creativity, purpose, or peace, don't look for them in your inbox. Look for them in your rest, because they arrive quietly once the mental clutter clears. Sleep isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's one of the most powerful, underrated tools for rebuilding your emotional core. And it's one of the first things we sacrifice when life gets chaotic. But what if, instead of grinding through your limits, you protected your capacity? What if you saw sleep not as an obstacle, but as the foundation for everything you want to build? Aristotle said, happiness depends upon ourselves, but happiness also depends on your hormones, your brain function, your ability to respond instead of react. And none of that happens if your system is fried. So tonight, honor your future self by choosing rest. Turn down the noise, close the loops, put the phone down, breathe. Make your bedroom a sanctuary, not a second office or a scrolling station. Let it be a place where your mind can fall, where your body can repair, and where your soul can find silence. 4. Get quiet, even if it feels weird. It's wild how rare silence has become. Not just the kind where there's no sound, but the kind where you aren't reaching, reacting, or running. We're constantly surrounded by something: notifications, headlines, opinions, to-do lists, noise from the outside, and even more noise on the inside. But stillness, just sitting with yourself, breathing, being. That feels unnatural to most people now, uncomfortable, even threatening. And yet that's exactly where the real work happens. You don't need a candlelit room or a fancy cushion. You don't need to chant or clear your mind of every thought. What you need is presence. Just 5 minutes of it. 5 honest, uninterrupted minutes where you're not trying to fix anything or figure anything out. You're just sitting with yourself, not your roles, not your responsibilities, just you. No filters, no performance, just breath and being. Because here's the truth we're rarely taught. Dopamine isn't only sparked by excitement, novelty, or hustle. It also rises in peace, in presence, in that rare space between reaction and response. When you give yourself silence, even a little, you're giving your nervous system room to exhale. You're signaling that it's safe to rest, to feel, to recalibrate. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic minds, once wrote, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He wasn't being poetic, he was being practical, because when the world gets loud, and it always does, the most powerful move isn't to shout over the noise, but to step away from it. Not forever, just long enough to remember who you are underneath it all. Carl Jung understood this too. He said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The problem is, we've made looking inside feel like a chore, like it has to be perfect or profound. But awakening doesn't start with insight, it starts with awareness, with the simple act of noticing your breath, your thoughts, your tension, and not judging any of it, just being with it. Stillness is not laziness. It's not a waste of time. It's not doing nothing. Stillness is action. It's the most radical thing you can do in a world that wants you constantly distracted, constantly reacting, constantly pulled away from yourself. And in that stillness, your mind begins to soften. Your focus sharpens. Your emotions settle. You start to hear the thoughts behind the thoughts, the quiet truths that don't scream, but whisper. Socrates once said, "Know thyself." But how do you know yourself if you never sit with yourself? If you're always moving, always consuming, always chasing? Self-knowledge requires self-meeting, and silence is how that meeting begins. Here's the best part. You don't need to force it. There's no right way to do it. You can sit in your car for 5 minutes before walking into work. You can take a slow walk without your phone. You can lie on your bed and just stare at the ceiling. Don't overthink it. Just pause. Let the stillness hold you for a moment. Let it do its quiet work. Aristotle believed the highest form of happiness came from contemplation, from turning inward and connecting with something deeper than the chaos of everyday life. He called it eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that doesn't come from what you do, but from who you are. Stillness gives you access to that part of yourself. So maybe today, give yourself the gift of 5 quiet minutes. No expectations, no goals, just presence. Let the silence say what words can't. Let your breath be the anchor. Let the stillness remind you that not all growth comes from motion. Some of it comes from still roots. 5. Set small goals and celebrate hard. It's wild how rare silence has become. Not just the kind where there's no sound, but the kind where you aren't reaching, reacting, or running. We're constantly surrounded by something. Notifications, headlines, opinions, to-do lists, noise from the outside, and even more noise on the inside. But stillness? Just sitting with yourself, breathing, being. That feels unnatural to most people now. Uncomfortable, even threatening. And yet that's exactly where the real work happens. You don't need a candle-lit room or a fancy cushion. You don't need to chant or clear your mind of every thought. What you need is presence, just 5 minutes of it. 5 honest, uninterrupted minutes where you're not trying to fix anything or figure anything out. You're just sitting with yourself, not your roles, not your responsibilities, just you. No filters, no performance, just breath and being. Because here's the truth we're rarely taught. Dopamine isn't only sparked by excitement, novelty, or hustle. It also rises in peace, in presence, in that rare space between reaction and response. When you give yourself silence, even a little, you're giving your nervous system room to exhale. You're signaling that it's safe to rest, to feel, to recalibrate. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic minds, once wrote, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He wasn't being poetic, he was being practical. Because when the world gets loud, and it always does, the most powerful move isn't to shout over the noise, but to step away from it. Not forever, just long enough to remember who you are underneath it all. Carl Jung understood this too. He said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The problem is, we've made looking inside feel like a chore, like it has to be perfect or profound. But awakening doesn't start with insight. It starts with awareness, with the simple act of noticing your breath, your thoughts, your tension, and not judging any of it, just being with it. Stillness is not laziness. It's not a waste of time. It's not doing nothing. Stillness is action. It's the most radical thing you can do in a world that wants you constantly distracted, constantly reacting, constantly pulled away from yourself. And in that stillness, your mind begins to soften, your focus sharpens, your emotions settle. You start to hear the thoughts behind the thoughts, the quiet truths that don't scream, but whisper. Socrates once said, "Know thyself." But how do you know yourself if you never sit with yourself? If you're always moving, always consuming, always chasing? Self-knowledge requires self-meeting, and silence is how that meeting begins. Here's the best part. You don't need to force it. There's no right way to do it. You can sit in your car for 5 minutes before walking into work. You can take a slow walk without your phone. You can lie on your bed and just stare at the ceiling. Don't overthink it. Just pause. Let the stillness hold you for a moment. Let it do its quiet work. Aristotle believed the highest form of happiness came from contemplation, from turning inward and connecting with something deeper than the chaos of everyday life. He called it eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that doesn't come from what you do, but from who you are. Stillness gives you access to that part of yourself. 6. Play the soundtrack that feeds your soul. There's something strange and beautiful about how certain sounds can reach us when nothing else can. Not a conversation, not a pep talk, not even our own inner voice. But a single song, it can cut through the fog in seconds. You hear a melody, a few chords, and suddenly you feel. You're not numb anymore. You're not disconnected. You're right there, in your body, in your memories, in your emotion. That's not coincidence. That's not magic. That's music doing its quiet, powerful work. And what's happening in that moment? Your brain is releasing dopamine, not from logic or productivity, but from rhythm, from connection, from a sound that speaks where words fail. Carl Jung once said, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct." Music taps into that instinct. It bypasses all your defenses and goes straight to your core. It doesn't ask for permission. It just lands. The Stoics might not have written volumes about music itself, but they were deeply attuned to harmony. They believed in living according to nature's rhythm, in aligning your internal world with external truth. Epictetus taught that the key to tranquility was choosing what aligns with your nature, and for many of us, music is that alignment. It brings us back to balance when everything feels off-kilter. You ever feel 10 feet tall because of a single beat drop, or cry unexpectedly to a song you haven't heard in years? That's not just nostalgia. That's memory, emotion, and meaning rising to the surface. Music reminds us we're still here, still human, still capable of feeling something real. And the best part? It doesn't demand anything from you. You don't have to explain, fix, or perform. You just have to listen, not passively, intentionally. Curate your emotional landscape. Make playlists that meet you where you are. When you need energy, put on something that lifts. When you need grounding, go slow and soft. When you're wrestling with something, play the songs that speak truth, even if it hurts. Plato believed that music gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything. He saw music as more than art. It was nourishment. It was structure and release, all at once. When you listen with purpose, music becomes a kind of therapy, a way to reset your mood, sharpen your focus, or express what's been bottled up. Socrates might ask, what music makes you more you? What are the songs that reflect your values, your struggles, your hopes? Not what's trending, not what everyone else is playing, your soundtrack. Because music, when chosen well, becomes a mirror. It shows you who you've been, who you are, and sometimes, if you're lucky, who you're becoming. And here's the real trick. Don't just consume music like background noise. Let it be part of your self-care, your mindfulness, your emotional hygiene. Let it move through your system like air, cleansing, clearing, waking up the parts of you that life sometimes dulls. So maybe today, you don't need another podcast or productivity hack. Maybe you just need to sit with a song. Let it play, let it land, let it shift something in you. Because when dopamine flows through sound, it doesn't just lift your mood. It reminds you that you're alive, still changing, still feeling, still human. And in this fast-paced world where silence can be deafening, music is one of the few things that can make you feel whole again without needing a single word. 7. Protect your energy. Choose better people. There's a certain kind of tired that sleep can't fix. A heaviness that doesn't come from work or stress, but from the people around you. You leave a conversation and feel smaller, not because of anything obvious, not because of words said directly, but because something about that interaction drained you, took more than it gave. And here's the truth most of us were never taught. That's not in your head. That's your nervous system speaking. Our bodies are always listening, even when our minds are trying to rationalize, dismiss, or ignore. We sense energy before we analyze behavior, and some people, without meaning to, pull us away from ourselves. They cloud our thinking, confuse our instincts, and make us question the parts of us that were once solid. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And the question is, are you being transformed in the right direction?" The Stoics talked about this in a quieter way. Seneca warned that the company we keep shapes our thoughts, our values, even our sense of what's normal. He believed we should choose friendships like we choose a mentor, with intention, with clarity, with self-respect. Because when you're surrounded by chaos, you don't rise above it, you adapt to it, even if it costs you your peace. There's this cultural obsession with having a big circle, with being liked, being followed, being included. But inclusion without alignment is emptiness, and presence without authenticity is just noise. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living. I'd add that the unexamined relationship is not worth keeping. Because the truth is, you become the energy you absorb, and you absorb more than you think. Think of your energy like a home. You wouldn't leave your front door open all night, letting anyone walk in. So why do we do that with our attention, our time, our presence? Not everyone deserves a seat at your table just because they ask for one. That might sound harsh, but it's actually an act of wisdom, of boundaries. And boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. You can open them, but you get to choose who. Aristotle believed that friendship was built on virtue, not convenience, not gain, but mutual growth. A friend, in his view, was someone who helps you become more of who you are, not less. Someone who challenges you gently, sees you clearly, lifts you without needing to be loud about it. You don't need a crowd. You need one or two people who make you feel lighter after you speak, calmer, clearer. So pay attention. After every interaction, ask yourself, did that conversation energize me or deplete me? Did I feel seen or did I feel judged? Did I speak from my truth or did I shrink to fit in? These aren't dramatic questions. They're necessary ones, because they reveal whether your environment is helping your mental clarity or sabotaging it quietly. Plato once said, "People are like dirt. They can either nourish you and help you grow as a person, or they can stunt your growth and make you wilt and die." It sounds extreme, but he wasn't wrong. Emotional toxins are real, and just like you'd stop drinking poisoned water, you've got to stop soaking in conversations that leave you worse off. Now here's the part many skip over. Be that kind of energy for others too. Don't just take up space. Hold it. Listen without fixing. Support without comparison. Celebrate without needing to shine. Because when you show up with that kind of energy, you attract people who do the same. And suddenly, you're not just surviving your relationships, you're growing through them. Protect your peace. Honor your instincts. Trust how your body reacts when someone enters the room. Because your energy isn't unlimited, it's sacred. And giving it to the right people isn't just kindness, it's self-respect in action. 8. Let the sun touch you. There's a kind of healing that doesn't ask for effort. It doesn't come in a bottle, on a screen, or through some new productivity app. It's older than philosophy, simpler than therapy. And somehow, we've forgotten it. It's the quiet, powerful medicine of just being in the sun, not rushing somewhere, not checking your phone under a bright sky, not squeezing in a jog while blasting a podcast. I'm talking about standing still, letting the light hit your skin, letting your eyes meet the horizon without distraction, being part of the world, instead of constantly trying to conquer it. It sounds too easy to matter, but it matters more than we realize. Your body is designed to respond to natural light. Morning sun, in particular, is like a reset switch for your brain. It activates dopamine, the chemical behind motivation and focus. It helps balance your circadian rhythm, which is just a fancy way of saying it tells your body when to feel awake, when to rest, and how to regulate mood in between. Plato believed that light itself symbolized truth, clarity that reveals what was hidden. He compared the sun to knowledge, to inner sight. And while he was speaking metaphorically, modern science echoes that truth quite literally. Natural sunlight doesn't just illuminate the world around you, it realigns your chemistry, your energy, your perspective. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how do you become that person when you're never still enough to hear what your body, your mind, your soul is asking for? Sunlight is not just brightness, it's space, it's a pause. It's nature's way of saying, you don't have to hustle for every drop of energy. Some things are freely given. And yet, we hide from it. We bury ourselves in fluorescent lights and glowing screens. We spend the best hours of the day indoors, behind windows, in traffic, under deadlines. Then we wonder why we feel foggy, restless, irritable. It's not just stress, it's disconnection from the most basic rhythms that once kept us sane. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Dwell on the beauty of life, watch the stars, and see yourself running with them." He knew that clarity often comes not from effort, but from awareness, and that awareness often begins in nature, in what's real, quiet, and consistent, like the sky, the warmth on your skin, the feeling of breath sinking with breeze. So what if, instead of reaching for your phone first thing in the morning, you stepped outside instead? No purpose, no rush, just 5 minutes of real light, letting it soak into your skin, letting your eyes recalibrate to something natural, letting your system know we're grounded, we're safe, we're starting the day from center. Aristotle believed that happiness came from harmony, from living in accordance with your nature. And you are not built for artificial light and chronic speed. You are built for rhythms, cycles, seasons. And sunlight is part of that design. It doesn't just help your mood, it regulates your hormones, sharpens your focus, improves your sleep, and more than anything, it gives your mind a moment to just be. So here's a simple challenge. Reclaim 5 minutes a day. Step outside. Feel the light on your face. Watch the wind move through the trees. Let your nervous system come home to something that doesn't demand performance. Because what your screen can't give you, sunlight can. And the best part, it's free. Always has been, always will be. 9. Do what makes you lose track of time. Somewhere along the way, we traded joy for productivity. We stopped doing things simply because they made us feel alive and started asking, what's the point? Is this useful? Can I turn it into something? If it couldn't be monetized or measured, we quietly let it go. But here's the truth. Those little things you used to love, the hobbies you forgot, the moments that made time vanish, those weren't distractions, they were medicine. Remember how you used to get lost in something? Maybe it was painting or strumming a guitar. Maybe it was building something with your hands or getting pulled into a story so deeply you forgot the world around you. That state, where your mind is fully present, where time blurs, is called flow. And it's not just poetic, it's chemical. Your brain floods with dopamine in those moments. Not because you're winning, but because you're aligned. Carl Jung said, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct." That instinct is still in you. The problem is, we stopped trusting it. We grew up, we got serious, and in doing so, we turned joy into a reward instead of a requirement. The Stoics weren't against pleasure. They were against dependency on it. They believed in joy that came from within, from things that aligned with our nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself." Joy doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need an audience. It just needs space, a quiet place at the table. Socrates believed that understanding yourself was the path to wisdom. So ask yourself, what lit me up before the world told me what I should be? What made me feel fully alive, not to impress anyone, not to be productive, but just to be? That version of you still exists, buried under expectations, drowned out by deadlines, but not gone. Here's the thing. They lied to us when they said leisure is lazy, that hobbies are childish, that if it doesn't make money, it doesn't matter. The truth? Those passions anchor you. They remind you that you're more than your job title, your inbox, your calendar. They bring you back to yourself. Aristotle taught that the highest form of happiness is found in eudaimonia, a life of deep fulfillment where you flourish by expressing your true nature. And your true nature includes joy, curiosity, creativity, not for gain, not for applause, just for the sake of the doing. You don't need to be amazing at it. You don't need a portfolio or a side hustle. You don't need to explain it. You just need to give it room. Sketch in a notebook. Play a song that never leaves your room. Grow something in a garden. Build something with your hands. Get lost on purpose. Because those moments, they reconnect you to a part of yourself that is often ignored but never truly gone. And when you honor that part, something subtle shifts. You feel clearer, more grounded, less restless, more you. Plato believed that art and music were ways of aligning the soul. They weren't extras, they were essential. A way to make sense of the world without needing to explain it. When you engage in something that brings you joy, you're not escaping life. You're re-entering it with color and clarity. 10th, let it out. There's a kind of pressure we rarely talk about. It doesn't come from the outside. It builds quietly on the inside. It's the pressure to hold everything together, to be okay, to be the strong one, the calm one, the reliable one. And at first it looks like strength, but over time it starts to crack. Because carrying the weight of unspoken stress day after day doesn't build resilience, it breeds exhaustion. The world glorifies the grind. It celebrates people who power through and wear burnout like a badge of honor. But here's what the body knows, even when the mind tries to deny it. Stress that isn't released doesn't disappear. It hides, it festers, it becomes fatigue, anxiety, mood swings, and eventually total emotional shutdown. And by the time you reach that point, it's no longer about willpower. It's biology. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." That includes stress. When you pretend it's not there, it doesn't fade. It just finds new places to live. In your shoulders, in your chest, in the background noise of your thoughts. And if you don't give it an exit, it turns on you. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. The Stoics had a reputation for emotional control, but that's often misunderstood. They weren't emotionless. They just refused to be ruled by emotion. Epictetus taught that while we can't control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. And sometimes the wisest response isn't to push harder, it's to pause, to feel, to release. Release doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always a breakdown or a long, soul-bearing monologue. Sometimes it's taking a walk without your phone, sitting in stillness and breathing deeply, letting tears fall without apologizing, writing in a journal, even if you think you have nothing to say, stretching your body in silence until something in you softens. It's not about doing it right. It's about doing something. Aristotle believed in balance, what he called the golden mean, not excess, not deficiency, but the middle way. The same applies here. Constant tension isn't strength. Constant release isn't indulgence, but healthy cycles of pressure and relief. That's how you stay grounded. That's how you stay clear. Because when you give yourself permission to let go, even a little, you create space. You stop clenching through life, and that space is where dopamine starts flowing again. Your system recalibrates. You stop surviving and you start living. Real clarity, motivation, and focus don't come from white-knuckling your way through stress. They come from releasing it. Socrates said, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." What good is endless doing if it disconnects you from yourself? You can only carry so much before something breaks. But wisdom isn't waiting until the break. Wisdom is recognizing when the load is too much and choosing to set it down before you collapse. So here's the truth. Releasing stress isn't a flaw in your character. It's a feature of your design. It's how your nervous system resets. It's how your emotions find their way home. And it's how your mind clears enough space to remember what matters. Let it out, bit by bit, in movement, in breath, in words, in stillness. Whatever way feels natural, let it move through you. Because what you don't release, you carry. And what you carry too long eventually carries you. Let go, not because you're falling apart, but because you're strong enough to stop pretending you have to hold everything together. That's not weakness. That's wisdom in motion. You don't have to figure everything out today. You just need to return to yourself, gently, consistently, honestly. If this message meant something to you, there's another video on the screen that continues this path. Go there next. And hey, when you're ready for more clarity, more calm, more inner strength, you'll know where to find us.